Now that we've learned to mix some colors on the color wheel, we're now going to learn some painting techniques. You should have a paper that looks very similar to this, and we're going to title it Watercolor Techniques. And please follow along as I label them. We're going to learn 3 big techniques. The first one is graded. That is when it goes from dark to light. All right, a section of the painting goes from dark to light with a color, which I'll do. The second one is flat. That means it stays continually the same as it goes across, the easiest and most basic one that people use. And the third one is overlap. This is all about watercolor. Watercolor about different colors over the top of each other and seeing how they change. Then down here we're going to put complementary colors. Colors that are directly across from each other on the color wheel. So complementary colors is red and green, right? So I'll put one here and one over here. And then I have to pick 4 more. I'll pick red, orange, and blue, green. And I'll let you do the other 2. And we'll get down to work on the main project here in the center is combining all these activities together. And a pomegranate here. And I'm going to draw this pomegranate on so that they're at least fist size. You see how I'm not using any one particular line? Then I'll come back and add details once I get it kind of in there a little bit. And you can see I'm putting on a little part where the pomegranate comes out. All right. Put a little bit, I don't like this part down here. I'm going to make that a little smoother. Maybe where it was on the tree. I'm going to put a nice horizon line. And I think I'll have my shadow going. Still don't like this. I'm going to get rid of that. I think I'll have my shadow going this way today. Put a nice little edge for a shadow on. I've got a little, where's my light source? Has to be over here, right? It's going to be darker as it goes across this way. And I've got my pomegranate top on here, kind of nice. Back in the distance there. Now you should do something similar. Then you have to title it. Okay, next up is doing the techniques. Here we've got our watercolor set, which is going to go above us, right? We've got our paper towels, which is going to go off to the side. Don't let it touch your paper, right? Don't let it touch your paper. If it does and you have it wet, it'll seep into it. Not good. Then we have our palette. I've pre-mixed some of these so you don't have to wait for me to do them all. All right. We're going to start with a graded. So I've mixed up a lot of paint. If you have just the top of your palette, watercolor palette to mix in, that thing needs to be completely full in there. Or if you have another spot to mix like something, you amount of paint for that, you'll run out if you don't have a good amount. Take your big, if it's been sitting around, mix it up a little bit. And to do graded, and maybe you're going to start out at the top. You're going to work your way across the top with a nice thick coat of paint. And you see how I keep filling my brush? I'm not going around the edges. I'm working my way from the top down. And now as I go down, you see how I'm no longer filling my paintbrush as I go down. I'm not filling it anymore. I'm starving it for paint. Till I get down to the bottom. I need a teensy bit more to finish it off at the bottom because I have enough. So if you need a teensy bit, you wipe it on the side like this so you only get a little bit in your brush. Right? Then I'll come back up, left to right, and you see I can smooth it out some. We want lots of paint up at the top. Don't have enough paint at the top, add print brush back in the paint, and you can back and kind of smooth it together. If it starts to dry out on you, put your brush in the water. Use a little bit of water over the top. Okay, it should go from dark to light. You see how it's dark to light? You get a little spot. Even with just a light amount of water, you can come back in and lighten it up some if you want. Alright, I'm going to let this dry. Looks like it might come out nice. What if it doesn't come out nice? It's okay to have these puddles, by the way. That's okay. In fact, that'll dry darker, and that's one of the beauties of watercolor. If it doesn't come out dark enough or you don't see it getting dark to light, paint it again with a slightly different color. It doesn't even have to be the same color. It just needs to be a lot of it. Okay, now we're going to do some flat, right? Some flat. So here I've got purpley color mixed up. And to do this one, we're going to start off in a corner, work our way across. Our goal is to get it flat everywhere. That means it's the same color. However, if you let an edge dry out, like this edge, and I go over here and I'm doing this for a while and I ignore it, it will form a line. So in order to form a line where it's dried on the edge, your edge is wet. So you're always working your edges, making sure that you go from one side to the next and you don't let it dry out. Right. See, I'm just kind of evenly putting the flat purple on the paper. Sure, there's going to be a couple spots that are a little darker where they do, but the goal is to get it reasonably the same. It shouldn't be grading like the other one where it's going from light to dark. Once again, if your dark dries, like I'm seeing mine, I might want to come back and do it a little darker up at the top to get it graded. That's okay, I could repaint it again. But you want to wait till it's dry. Don't try and do it while it's wet, it'll just make a mess. Next up is overlap. Overlap has to be 3 layers. The first layer is adding a thin coat of nice paint as a flat all over the place. And you can see I'm paying close attention to keep working my edges and don't let them dry out. It's a big area. Don't sit there with a little brush. Make sure you have your big brush to do this section. I've mixed up a lot of paint for it. I haven't mixed up a teensy amount. If you run out halfway through, it'll be really annoying since these colors are supposed to be hand mixed. They shouldn't be the set or from here. They should be your own, be from the color wheel. They shouldn't be from the set here as a preset color. They should be your own color. And you can see this color's not in that set anywhere or on the color wheel. It's like a yellow green with a bit of like just to make it look a little odd. Alright, so I got that all nice and on there. I'm going to let that dry. Now, because things go horribly wrong, if you allow it to 2 areas to get wet next to each other, which you don't want to do, you could end up with a paint that is all smeared. So you have to actually take some time and paint things in so that they have time to dry with watercolors, right? So there we go. I think I want a teensy bit of brown in it. So now thought about my pomegranate, opposite color on the color wheel, because you have to have complementary colors in here. We're going to have to paint this in so it has a complementary color set. In this case, my pomegranate's red, so I'm going to need some green in the background somewhere. And then over on here, besides the complementary color set where they're directly across from each other, so if you're like doing a banana, you would have to use violet in your background somewhere, right? If you're doing an orange, you would have to use blue in your background somewhere. If you decided to do a an apple, right, then you have to do a red background. Let's say you have a red apple, then you do green. You know what I'm saying? A eggplant, you need a yellow background, right? So here I've got a pomegranate. Obviously my pomegranate's going to be kind of reddish colored, but my background has to be a little bit of green. So I've mixed up some green, and you want to paint from the back to the front in watercolors. And so I'm just going to start out by checking off one of my boxes and getting a flat in the background. So I'm going to come in here and remember to keep edge. Don't get so into it that you're on one section and you don't think about the other section. So take a little second here and keep that wet for a second. Then I can come back over here and paint in the rest of this, and it'll give me a minute while it's setting up a little bit. And I'm going to paint my background in. And I'll come over here and I'll work my way across. All right, I've let this dry so that all of it's nice. And I've pre-mixed some colors. Remember, the table plane can be any color you want as long as you have complementary colors somewhere in it. And I'm going to have a red pomegranate and a green background. So here I'm going to check off the graded part and have my table plane go from dark to light. And I've mixed up kind of a brownish color. I'm going to start on this side and work my way over. Now, maintaining edges in watercolor is very helpful. You got to keep a sharp edge and try not to go all over the place when you're doing stuff. It really does help. I'm going to paint right over the top of my shadow because my shadow is sitting on top of the table plane. So I'll come in, put it in here. I'm going to get the other side on. If it were a little darker, I could do the graded right away, but this is sinking in so fast, I'm realizing that it'll probably be faster and better for me if I put on this layer here. And then, as soon as I'm done, I'll come back over to this side. It's still wet. Pretty wet anyway. Add some more. See, I'm taking the paint off my brush by just tapping it on the paper towel. I'll put a little bit more on over here. And now I'll do the same, get rid of it on my paper towel. Or you could rinse your brush out and dry it off, but sometimes I get a little bit too much water. So I get a little puddle here. I don't want that. I'm going to redistribute it there. So now you can see it's going from dark to light a little bit. I still think it could be a little bit more even right there. And if you want it a little darker, well, you can wait 20 more seconds. Add a teensy bit more up at the top. Now I have to wait for this to dry before I put in my pomegranate color. But while that's doing that, I'm going to start on my second layer of the overlap. Overlap means things are on top of each other, remember, so that some things are showing through. So I've mixed up a greenish color and tested it on my tester over here, which is starting to get full. And now I'm going to go from one corner to the other, and you can see when I put the second layer on, you can still see the light green underneath, and you now see this other green over the top. Maybe we'll pick a warm color for our last one. After this is dry, I'm going to go from the opposite corner, and then what we'll have is one area that has 3 and other areas that have 2 layers on them, and you can see the beautiful things that happen with watercolor when you start layering things. So we're going to let this dry for a minute. If you are waiting, you could do these. So now I've got this reasonably dry. Remember, just touch it. If it still feels wet or cold, don't start. And I've got a color mixed up for my pomegranate up here to start with. And I'm going to start with just here. I'm going to start off on one spot, and that's why we went from the back to the front, because now when you paint this over the top of your other layers, right, you're going to have a nice consistent thing that looks like the pomegranates in front of the other stuff. And I want to keep my edges wet, so I'm coming along. I'll do a little on the top, and I'll do a little on the bottom. And right now I'm just kind of filling it in so that it's pretty even. Going to come back and make it look 3D, because I want to get overlapping going on and some more graded going on, so I get that. Remember, you have to show all of those parts in this piece. You have to show flat, graded, and overlap in this painting, along with complementary colors for whatever you do. If you decide to do a banana, then you might have a purple background somewhere, and you could grade the table plane and put different layers on top of your banana planes where it curves around. Okay, as you can see, I've got that going on there a little bit. It's looking nice. I've got another color here. It's a little bit darker over on the shady side. I'm going to put that down. You can see it's a little bit darker color. And I'm going to start grading it across. To do that, I'm just going to put a little bit over on this side. And I'll rinse my brush out, dry it off on the paper towel, and kind of blend anything that doesn't need blending yet. It was still wet, so it kind of blended together, but we need quite a bit more of that. So I'm going to do this part up here while I'm waiting. I mixed up another color. You need 3 colors for this, and I'm going to go from one corner to the other corner. This guy, keeping my edges wet. Don't want to let them dry out. That way you won't get a line. You don't want to scrub too much, or you'll pick up this other layer and it'll blend together. You want it to just sit on top of the other one. There we go. And you can see I've got one area with 2 layers, another area with 2 layers, and this area has 3 colors underneath it. Alright, by now hopefully you've noticed that things that are done in watercolor start out really vibrant while you're painting them, and then as they dry, they get a little bit less vibrant as they soak into the paper some and get a little bit transparent with the paper. Here you can see this overlap is now done. This guy's all nice and dry. I added a shadow. The shadow starts out dark and it gets lighter as it goes out. So I've got graded now in 2 places. On the background plane back here, and then in the shadow right here. So that's good. We're racking up points for graded. We've got flat in the distance, and we're working on overlap. My next thing is to start this to get overlap. I'm going to switch to a medium-sized brush now because I'm starting to put on some details for something. All right, and when you switch to smaller spots and stuff, it's a good idea to do detail brushes, which are a little smaller. I've mixed up a little bit more vibrant red here. I'm going to put this on. I'm going to start making this look a little bit like a ball, right? So it has a little bit of shading that's a little bit nicer. So I'm going to put some of that on here. I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm going to dry it off on my paper towel so I have only a little bit of water. Oops, I did it too much trying to show you. A little bit of water so I can blend it out. So that way I won't have a line. Otherwise I leave it like that, I'm going to have a nasty looking little line right there. This way I can come in and you see how I can smooth it all out. And I leave a little bit of wet area there. That's just water, so it can kind of soften it and not get a line. Got a little bit of a bump there, so take a little bit up. All right, now I'm going to add some more over in here, right? Maybe I'll add a little bit more over here first. So I'm going to put a little bit of color running up around. Remember how we shaded the sphere? I'm doing the same thing here, but with paint and a little bit of color. Taking it, I see a little bit of line there. I'm going to go in there and soften that up with some water. See, I'm softening that up. I'm trying to make it look a little bit more rounded. I mixed up a really dark color, which I'm going to put down here. It's got red in it, but not as much red. Back here for the 8s, for the dark area. And I'm overlapping. Not only am I overlapping, but I'm grading at the same time. So it's going from light to dark. And to get it so that I don't see it doing that very fast, I'm taking my brush and I'm running it over the top of it with some water very lightly, wiping my brush on the paper towel so I have control over how much water I have in my brush. Here you can see it starting to look nice. I think we could use a little bit of purple up in here. So put a little bit up there, wipe my brush off, work it in, maybe a teensy bit more over here. It looks kind of dull over here, so what I'm going to do is something you may not have thought of, and if you have a fruit or vegetable too, you can do this also. I'm going to take bright yellow. It's just yellow, solid, almost vibrant. It's going to sink in with what we already have here on the pomegranate. It's going to turn it to like a yellowy orange because we already have a reddish color here. It'll kind of add a little bit of a highlight there. So it looks like the sun's hitting it right there. Let me add a teensy bit more red right here. You can see I'm just slowly working it up. That you do this, you can do it really slow if you want. You can take a break. Every time I've stopped the video, I've taken a break and let it dry. I'm going to work on the top up here a little bit. To work on the top, I'm going to use this very small brush here. Get it wet. Start in and get a little bit of shadow on this side. A little bit of yellow over here. Make it seem kind of bright. I'm going to let it dry for a second, then I'm going to come back and finish some more of this. You can put more detail on things after it dries, but you can't do it while it's wet. It'll just smear together. So I'm going to let it dry for a second. Alright, I'm going to put some finishing touches on this guy. I'm going to take my little brush, come in with some darker purples, and add another layer down here in the dark section. Sometimes that really brings stuff alive. So you see I'm just doing almost like an outline here with my brush along the edge. Then I'm going to rinse my brush out using my little brush now, because I'm really doing the last of the last details. Rinse my brush out, dry it off a little on the paper towel. Taking some time to smooth it with just a little bit of water. You have to press lightly with your brush too, so you don't pick up too much paint. Now I'm gonna, well, I don't like that line. There we go, that feels a little better to me, a little more natural. Right now I'm gonna take the same color and I come up here and add a few little details to the edge of my pomegranate edge here. Kind of make it look a little bit more realistic. And I'm going to take even a darker purple that I have here and come in the back here where I have any wet spots. And yeah, I want a little bit more of this purple. I kind of like that better. I'm just going to put kind of like a silhouette back here of the shape of a couple more tendrils sticking up with my little brush, right? I don't want to get it in the spots I've already done. I want to, because I don't want them to smear. I want it to be in nice little dark areas to make it stand out. And make my other part of my little stem look nice. And I think I still want a little bit more bright here, so I'm going to take a teensy bit of yellow. I don't want to touch it to that though. Yeah, just a little bit more. Maybe a teensy bit more right here. I don't want to get a line, so I rinse my brush out. Go around the edges. Now once you've got yours painted in, oh, I don't like this line here, it's a little dark. And it's dried a little bit, so I'll take a little bit of one of my other colors. It's kind of close. I'll put it up next to it, and it'll wet it a teensy bit. Then I can soften it just a little bit to make myself happier. All right, now once you've got yours all painted in and it's looking happy for you, you're ready to go. You're gonna let it dry. You're gonna make sure you have everything titled. All right, got a shadow in, and you've done graded in here where it goes dark to light. You've done overlapping here, here, there, up here. You can see a little overlapping bits there. And we've got flat in here. That's what you should have in your piece when you turn it into me. And these guys nicely painted in.